You're watching.
Subscribe.
Hello, you're watching ScreenStalker. I'm Laurie Blake, and boy howdy, wasn't Game of Thrones brutal? Like, pretty incredible in places, but bleak and brutal nonetheless. Because with 1 week left before the finale of what has to be one of the most amazing television series of all time, we've decided to dedicate this entire week on ScreenStalker to Game of Thrones, and we're bringing you something GOT related every single day. Starting with this review of last night's episode, which I will give a holding title of Be Careful What You Wish For. But before we get into that, have yourself a super click party by tapping subscribe, massaging the like button, and burning the bell icon to a blackened husk with a hearty Dracarys to enable notifications, and leave us a comment down below to answer our question of the day. Who do you think will find themselves sat on the Iron Throne come the end of Game of Thrones? Is there even an Iron Throne anymore? Right, well, more on that in a second, because on with the review, and it kind of goes without saying that there will be spoilers ahead as we discuss the ins and outs and ins again and ins again and ins again and through the eyes of Game of Thrones Season 8 Episode 5, The Bells. Now, to quickly call back to that placeholder title I gave this review, because for years now, we have wanted to see Daenerys and her forces storm King's Landing, wrench Cersei's pursed little face and buttocks from the Iron Throne, and install herself or Jon or Arya or just anyone who is good and nice and proper as the new ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. And we sort of got most of what we wished for, and it wasn't what we imagined, was it? It was bleak and dark and surprisingly crispy. But before that happened, this episode opened with the crew on Dragonstone regrouping after the loss of Miss Sandy and one of the dragons at the end of episode 4. We learn that Daenerys has shut herself away in her quarters and is barely eating or talking to anyone, which is upsetting Varys, because if she's not eating, how in the hell can you poison her? Open up, here comes the dragon. What's suggesting is happening off screen here is that Dany is going slightly mad king on us, slowly losing that air of benevolence she's had since she became the breaker of chains, or as the young girl who walked naked into the fire with those 3 stones and came out with 3 dragons. But more on that in a sec though. Because meanwhile, Varys, the master of whisperers, is very noisily going about the business of plotting against Dany. He's sending out notes revealing Jon Snow's true nature to who knows, seemingly plotting to poison Daenerys with the kitchen staff and beseeching Jon to use his claim to the Iron Throne. So it's not all that surprising when Varys gets grassed up by Tyrion after Dany works out that Sansa must be masterminding this dissension in the ranks by spreading the news of Jon's true lineage. So Varys meets his end by the way of Drogon, and it all felt a bit of a disservice to one of the more interesting political movers and shakers in Westeros, because to be caught so obviously plotting isn't really fitting of the man known as the Spider. Now, there's an argument to be made that the need for haste forced his hand into a bolder play than one he would normally make, and also there's the potential of a posthumous effect on the outcome of the series with a letter we see him writing in that opening scene. And also he doesn't exactly seem surprised when they come and get him. But this is not the only death or swerve that fans didn't exactly like about this episode. Because after a brief bit of board shuffling where the major players arrive at King's Landing ready for the assault, Jon, Tyrion and Grey Worm by boat, Arya and the Hound skulking through the crowds as they move into the walls of the keep, and Jaime Lannister who gets locked out and has to find an alternate route. We then move into the dominating act of this episode, the battle for King's Landing, or mutually assured destruction as it probably should be known. And this battle, which we've seemingly been waiting for since the series started, initially seemed like it was going to be a bit of a damp squib as Dany blitzes the Iron Fleet with Dragonfire, burns the Golden Company, and wipes all of the Scorpion bolt throwers off the battlements too, leading to this immensely tense scene as the outer walls burn and the combined might of the Dothraki unsullied and the Northmen bear down on the remaining Kingsguard, and they choose to signal the surrender. They scream, "Ring the bells! Ask the Queen to ring the bells!" Something which Tyrion had told the forces for good, and I use that quite lightly now, to listen out for. Now Cersei stands atop the Red Keep, resolute, defiant, almost ready to let her city burn, and we never actually see her give the order to ring the bells, and yet they start to chime, as if the city itself, all of the innocents have betrayed her and risen up and decided their own fate. And as the bells ring out and the surrender is sounded, we see Dany lose her freaking mind! Because all of these years of dreaming about this moment to come and liberate the city from the Lannisters to finally topple Cersei, she decides in that moment that no surrender is good enough. She won't be denied her birthright, her revenge for her dragon, for Missandei, for her entire family lineage. It's one of those TV moments when you can see all of the reasoning for why they would have her make that choice, and some of the more heavy-handed moments in this particular series have all but said as much. But it was the speed at which she just flipped, she turned heel, that plenty of fans took umbrage with. Because people on Twitter and reviewers thought that the turn to the dark side for Dany was unearned, and almost did away with all of the character growth that she had throughout the seasons. And I agree to some degree, because the rapidity of this switcheroo, which is really to do with the production and the 6-episode season, it does leave something to be desired. Because whereas before, Game of Thrones would have spent hours having people wander around on horseback, chatting away, slowly changing their minds, slowly losing them, expediency demands that we can sail to King's Landing in between scenes, and Dany can just decide to burn an entire city and thousands of innocents in the blink of an eye. And yeah, it's a mistake on her part of the cycle of mutually assured destruction that the characters are on. Dany burns the city, which no doubt makes her a target for the Starks in the final episode. The Hound and the Mountain showdown in Clegane Ball! And to kill him off, Sandor has to drive both of them off of the tower. Meanwhile, to best Jaime in combat, Euron ends up dead too, but happy because he killed Jaime Lannister, and he's nuts. And Arya is the only one who stops her weird cycle of revenge, dropping her childish fantasy. That's not quite the right word, is it? The fantasy she had when she was a child of killing Cersei. It's still weird, but it's factually correct. She drops that fantasy and she gives up on the idea of killing Cersei. And not only does she see out the episode, but she gets a free horse. And she no doubt gets a new mission of who to kill to better the world. Maybe after having closed both brown eyes and blue eyes, the remaining green eyes belong to Daenerys Targaryen rather than Cersei. But while the rage around Dany definitely does make sense, this episode felt like wish fulfillment gone horribly wrong. And what could be more Game of Thrones than that? Because after last week, we wanted to see Dany burn the Scorpions and the fleet, and we got that. But when she burned more, it turned much darker. We wanted to see Clegane Bowl, and we did. And it ended with neither man winning. It was admittedly an impossible contest from the off, one that would only destroy two characters people actually really liked. We also wanted to see Cersei fall, and she did. The weight of Lannister history and the pinnacle of her ambition crushing her and her brother beneath its bowels. Now, this also had backlash from fans who wanted a more cathartic end to the series' arch-villainess, and also to see Jaime Lannister's redemptive arc pay off in a more fitting fashion. But to me, this felt like Cersei's final act of defiance, her final bit of general bastardry, to die with the man she loves and deny anyone else the right to do it. Now, Jaime is harder to excuse, but every dark little thing he has done in Game of Thrones has been for the love of Cersei, and plenty of the good too, no doubt. To go to the north and stand against the hordes of the undead may have been leaving Cersei behind and disobeying her wishes, but if the undead broke through the north, they would have wiped out the rest of the continent, Cersei included. Now, this episode is a tough one to review because I think the pacing of the series has made the characters' choices seem random or rushed, when actually I think you can see most of the reasoning behind why people would do what they've done. It's almost as if we just haven't had the time to sit down and unpack it in the traditional Game of Thrones style, while on a horse for 6 episodes going somewhere that's really far away. Regardless, I actually enjoyed this episode immensely and felt like the mutually assured destruction of the characters in following through on their revenge goals was mirrored in the audience, who have waited for this fantasy to play out and got to see the worst side of it. Had the initial cheers of Dany blitzing the Iron Fleet turned to horror as all of the innocents went up in smoke, and we almost like 100 times lost Arya Stark, the best character in the series. Because ultimately, seeing all the things that we wanted to see has left us with a bad feeling. And now we're left with the predicament of working out who we actually want to sit on the Iron Throne, if there even is an Iron Throne. Thank you for watching, and don't forget that super click party on the like, subscribe, and bell icons, and don't forget to answer the question of the day in the comments down below too. Head on over there for more awesome ScreenStalker content. I've been Laurie Blake, and remember, we're watching.